Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. All right. Welcome back to Smart Franchising with FranSmart, the podcast where we dive deep into the strategies, stories, and systems that help franchisors and franchisees build lasting success together. And I'm your host, Dan Rowe, founder and CEO of FranSmart. Today, we have special guest Bob Kaufman, president of International at Xponential Fitness. Bob brings over 2 decades of global franchise and business development expertise. He's led international expansion and operations for powerhouse brands, including Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, Mathnasium, and more, growing them across dozens of countries. And today we're talking about ethical franchising and how franchisors should always put the success of their franchisees first. We want to help franchisors understand how to do this right, building the systems where the franchisee success isn't just a slogan, it's the foundation of sustainable growth. And we'll cover these 3 things and how franchisors can do things better. So appreciate it, Bob. How about a little bit of your background?
First of all, thank you, Dan, for having me here, and thank you for all that you do for franchising. It's an industry that I believe we both are very passionate about and want to do whatever we can to further everyone and having great experiences. So my background, I've been in franchising for quite a while, since the early 1990s. Most recently, right now, I'm with Xponential Fitness. We have brands like Club Pilates and Pure Barre, Yoga 6, Stretch Lab, Body Fit Training. Prior to this, I was with Mathnasium. Prior to that, I actually owned my own chain of restaurants, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and Tower Records.
Nice. And I'm dying to talk about international franchising too, because that's sort of the crescendo. Everyone who starts the concept eventually wants to be international. So we'll get into that in a second. But just in general, like as long as you've been in franchising, what do you think it is that gets so many franchisors get it wrong about focusing on anything other than the success of their franchisees?
I don't know if they're so focused on, I think they lose sight. They're so enamored with what they've created for all the right reasons. They've created something that has done well in their local market, and now they have opportunities to grow. And they begin to believe that everything that they do is the magic that has helped them franchise. And they lose sight of the fact that a lot of the things that are doing well in their first location may just be something as simple as rewarding circumstance and may not resonate at all internationally. And so then they get put into this position where they're franchising, where they need to represent that they know everything. And so they start putting, walls around what people can do or can't do, and completely ignore the reality and the needs of the local markets that they go into.
Yeah. What do you like when you hear the term ethical franchising, or when you use that term? What do you mean?
It's something you have to take really seriously. I mean, the franchisee is putting their own hard-earned capital into this business, and you can't take that lightly. That they're putting that money into further the brand that you've created. There's a huge amount of responsibility that a franchisor needs to have, and it should never be taken lightly.
Yeah. And it's okay to say no, right? If you've got the wrong franchisee, maybe they don't have the capital, they don't have the experience. So, I meet so many franchisors that are just so anxious to sell a franchise, and you don't realize like you're actually entering into a 20-year contract with this person. You take their money, you're actually responsible. But if you've got the wrong franchisee, it's like being in quicksand. Like the wrong people just are going to keep doing the wrong things. It's not going to work.
Well, and look, there's also the flip side of you may get Mr. Big, and they may just be a trophy collector, and you're just a brand that's going to sit on their shelf as a trophy, and you're going to get completely ignored because they have a divided loyalty from all the other portfolio brands that they have. So you really have to know what it is you want to do when you go into these markets, who's right for you and who's wrong for you. And absolutely, it's okay to say no, because one wrong decision could gobble up all of your attention and may irreparably harm your brand.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, you've built and scaled franchise systems in everything from coffee to supplemental learning, fitness. What are some lessons that you've learned that apply to all of the different kind of franchises you've been with?
I think, we're beginning to touch on it, and you will go more into it as we go through this whole conversation. But first of all, look, if you're not willing to change anything about your concept, then don't franchise. Just stay in your local market, but you should always be curious about what resonates locally and what doesn't. It's okay not to know everything. One thing is, we're all, a result of the experience that we've had to date. So if you're going into the Middle East or Japan and you've never grown into that market before, it's okay to say you don't know. Next thing is, you got to establish relationships, especially with franchisees, based on trust and integrity. And part of that is saying you have some common ground. We love the brand. We love the concept. This is what we're trying to recreate in this local market. These are the things that have worked to date. Let's see what works in these markets. And again, don't preemptively try to change things before you've proven that it doesn't work. And then again, know what your brand concept is and what it isn't, and do the right thing for the brand, staying focused on, the consumer experience. And I think the last thing, and it's one of these things that I always remind people, you have to enjoy the journey. If you're not enjoying the business and the people you're working with, it's a very tough way to pass time.
That's for sure. And you've said that the only thing that matters is your franchisee's success. A lot of franchisors don't initially understand that. They look at franchisees as their way of growing, and so almost like as I wouldn't say necessary evil, but they start franchising because franchising allows them to grow in a way that they can't otherwise. But how did you actually start to, when and how did you start realizing how important a franchisee's success really is?
Well, you have to think of a franchisee as the fourth leg of a relay race. We're all in the relay race together, but they're that final leg to be that bridge to local acceptance. So you can't win the race if not all legs of the relay race are working together. So I always talk about, the key drivers to make a franchise business work is engage, commit, and trust, right? They've got to engage in their business. They need to commit the time and effort and financial, resources to the business. And then they have to trust the system. And if they don't trust the system, it's not going to work. But that's why when you're bringing franchisees into the system, it's a courtship on both sides. Both sides need to make sure that they're aligned, with their vision of the brand. Are these users of the brand? I mean, I'm always afraid of selling a franchise to someone who heard from someone that this is a great brand, but they've never actually been to one of our locations, which shockingly happens a lot. Any business relationship is going to get tested. And so no matter how much you think everything is aligned, you're going to have some tough days. And if you don't have goodwill to draw upon, and you don't have a relationship to get through those tough times together, it's going to be very difficult. So we're aligned with the franchisee, and really we should be focusing on the consumer. If the consumer is not having a great experience, that reflects really poorly on the brand. I think something that I remind people always is the consumer has no idea if it's, Dan's Club Pilates or Bob's Club Pilates. They just see Club Pilates. And so there's a brand promise and commitment that we have to execute, because to them, we're all the same company.
Why do you think so many franchisors get it backwards? Like, brand first, it's their brand, their way, the highway, versus focusing on franchisee first?
I think part of it is a sense of they feel as though it's not okay to admit that they don't know something. I mean, they're a franchisor, they're supposed to be the expert in everything. And it's a kind of a crazy concept to say, what's the issue that we're facing? Let's talk about the things that we've done that's worked, what hasn't worked. Let's try to find the best practice together. But you have to invest in the relationship with the franchisees, and it can't be the I say, you do, and I'm not interested in your feedback. You have to have a direct relationship and a direct line with the franchisees. And as crazy as this sounds, Dan, you have to show up. You have to go to the locations. You just can't collect a royalty and sit back and just expect that everyone is going to just follow your standards because they signed an agreement. They have to have buy-in to the system, and that buy-in has to do with the fact that they respect you, you respect them. It goes both ways.
Yeah. And you said something a second ago that I still rolling around in my brain about the customer doesn't know if it's your Club Pilates or my Club Pilates. They just know it's Club Pilates and they expect a certain experience. I believe like no franchisee buys a franchise to default. No one buys a franchise to be terminated, get in default, get sideways with the franchisor. I don't think any franchisee buys a franchise to intentionally do things wrong, like along the way, like execute wrong. At some point, a franchisee, though, starts to check out. Like they start checking out. There's a difference between, I always say you got to invest in the sales you want, invest in the franchise company you're trying to build. So you're investing in something that's growing. As soon as a franchisee stops thinking that way and stops focusing on growing, they start thinking about cutting corners and things go off the rails. But why do you think, like, as long as you've been in this business, think about all the franchisees that have ever signed up for a brand with all the right intentions. Why do things go wrong? Like, why do you why do you think things get off track?
And it's interesting. My experience isn't so much that franchisees, check out as in they're overzealous and they're too excited and they want to enhance it, or they have a customer that comes in and says, hey, have you ever thought of, Mathnasium as an example? You have a family and you're growing your business and they're sending 3 kids there, and they have a kid that's struggling in biology, and you happen to have an instructor that sells biology, that knows biology well, and they say, hey, can I sign up for biology at Mathnasium? And the local owner is like, sure, I've got the guy, everything else. I'm like, the company is Mathnasium, and we have a brand promise, and we have no curriculum, no way to back it up. And we talked about that in discovery days beforehand, that if you think that that's something that you could do, that's fine. Don't buy a franchise. There's a commitment that all franchisees have to make sure that they're delivering the same product. And a lot of times the franchisees really get excited because, there's an entrepreneurial spirit to become a franchisee, which we absolutely want to celebrate, but we also want to keep within guardrails, because you're not free to do anything you want, because there are guardrails and brand standards that we have to adhere to, because if we didn't adhere to it, we wouldn't have a franchise system. And so those are some of the conversations that happen more often than people are willfully negligent. I don't see so much willful negligence. I see that they've lost sight of what the concept is and what the brand promises to consumers all over the world.
Yeah, but they didn't sign up to ever get to that point. And so that's the only experience that I've had, is that you get franchisees that sign up, something happens along the road that gets them to stop focusing on trying to do everything the right way. But hey, real quick, so I'm a big fan of Coffee Bean. I grew up in LA. I'm a big fan of Coffee Bean. Was an even bigger fan of Tower Records. Tell me, touch on those. Like, tell me a little bit about your story about Coffee Bean, Tower Records, even Mathnasium. But like, give me the story of those companies, your involvement with those companies, and some lessons that you learned.
Well, it's actually what got me started in franchising. Look, I'm a massive music fan. So when I graduated college, my goal in life was free CDs, free concert tickets, pay rent. If I could do that, it was the greatest thing in the world. I was also a Chinese language major in college and had traveled quite a lot internationally. I was an exchange student in Spain in high school. So I've always had this awareness of international. And again, I was a huge music fan. It eventually led me to being hired by Tower Records based in Tokyo to oversee 3 locations, one in Singapore, one in Hong Kong, and one in Taiwan. And no one could care less. They put this 25-year-old kid in charge of this and basically said, don't call us again. And I saw all kinds of opportunity, and I knew I was never going to get $1 of CapEx to grow the business. And I found, external counsel for Burger King and said, I want a franchise. How do we do this? And basically told me, you need the systems, you need the manuals, etc. And I started selling franchises for Tower Records, at first in Korea and then in Thailand. And the rest of the company was so focused on domestic that they're like, what's that kid doing out there? And sure enough, about 5 years later, I was 70% of global revenue. I was growing like crazy. And they're like, bring that kid back to Sacramento. And so that's where it started converting our wholly owned operations internationally into franchise. So I was actually, within a couple of years, I was running Latin America out of Japan, and I was selling the existing Tower Records company-owned operations as franchises, as ongoing concerns. And that's what started my franchise career. At the time, our franchisee in Malaysia ended up buying the franchise to the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. And the first Coffee Bean and Tea Leafs outside of LA were in Tower Records in Singapore and Malaysia.
Inside Tower Records?
Yeah. Well, they needed a location and, or adjacent to. And that business really took off for them. And they ended up buying the entire company and divesting of Tower Records and moving to LA. And so in the background, I was kind of the architect of the franchise system for Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf. And then late 2005, I ended up joining Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf to oversee, their global franchise efforts, both domestic. We also segmented the non-traditional business and international. It was a Singaporean family, so we had a home office in Singapore and in Los Angeles.
How many locations was Coffee Bean when you got there?
A couple, maybe about 100 locations, and when I left, about 1,000 locations, or maybe 1,100 locations.
Wow. Well, let's stay on international since we're on. Explain to people the good, bad, and ugly of taking an American brand globally.
Well, the good is you've got a brand with a compelling story and a history that, and systems and all the things you want to franchise. The bad is you've got to understand how to do business in the local country and make sure that you're compliant with local, franchise legislation, which can be excessive or nonsensical depending on the market and how developed their laws are. I usually think everything has a pendulum swing. It goes from no laws to incredibly restrictive, and then finally it lands in the middle once everyone realizes that the initial laws that they created were impossible to stay compliant with. And then the ugly is, something I refer to or I think of as cultural imperialism, that your Tower Records or your Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf and you're going to these markets, it's awesome, but don't think for a second that somebody in the Middle East could care less what a pumpkin spice latte is. They have no idea what it is. And, if you have your promotions around things like Halloween in the Middle East, that doesn't matter. So you have to create a promotional calendar and promotional drinks and items that are going to resonate in that market. It's not Halloween, it might be Ramadan, it might not be pumpkin spice latte, it might be pistachio and rose. You have to localize in these markets in order to resonate. And the Tower Records was such a cool company because it was the anti-corporate corporation, right? We, it was super cool. We wanted to make every location look specific to that area. Oh, this place has great street art. Have them come into the store and paint all the walls. And so it was so much about celebrating the local music scene and giving them the prime space in the locations and end caps and doing in-stores with the local Thai bands when we opened up in Thailand. And we actively encouraged our franchisees in each market to export, to all the other Tower Records around the world. So we would have the best music selection in the world. So we opened up in Korea in 1994, and I never thought K-pop would be this big, but they were selling K-pop to all of our locations around the world at the time. Again, if you would have told me that BTS would be selling out the Rose Bowl 3 nights, I would have never believed you. But it's exciting to see. But what we were the local music place for real music lovers. And so those are the types of things that we were always focused on. In Coffee Bean, the occasion in which a customer comes to a location. In the US, it's, the morning commuter and the afternoon treat. And not a lot of people go to a cafe at 8 o'clock at night. If you go to the Middle East, Nobody goes to a cafe in the morning. It's the de facto bar. And so they go at night. They want, table service, which we would never do in the US. It's not efficient. And the food program has to reflect the occasion, the occasion in which they're coming to the location. It sounds kind of silly, but no one eats a scone at 8 o'clock at night. So if you stick to these are our parameters, you have to have a scone, right? Well, no one's going to buy it. You have to match that. And as a brand, you have to be open-minded enough to know that that's not the essence of the brand. The drinks are all the same. It's still the ice blended. It's the famous ice that the air infused ice that everyone loves so much. All of that was the same, but contextually, we tried to make sure that we, again, built a bridge to local acceptance.
So we're glossing over this, I think, and I think that this is a really big thing for people to realize, because you had said, hey, here are coffee bean people had it in the morning and they have scones, and it's quick service. In the Middle East, it's table service mainly in the evening and no scones. If you guys were a big company, or your franchise partner is a big company, you probably, I'm curious, did you first go over there thinking you're going to open it the way that it's done in LA, or did you actually have that whole puzzle solved when you got there? And that's the part of things someone can learn something from, because if you're not that well capitalized and it's the same example, you bring a company like a coffee place over there, you expect it to go exactly like it's going to open soft. Like, I've been all over the Middle East. It's going to open soft, which may mean, like, to outsiders who see, because there's all this fanfare whenever you open up a new brand in the GCC. And if people go by and look at it and it's not busy, immediately everyone thinks, ooh, other people don't like it. It's not busy. So you guys settled on the formula that actually worked in the market. But did you guys know the formula, or did you go through a kind of a painful learning process?
For sure, we went through a growing and learning process. We don't know what works and what doesn't work. And part of, going into a market is making sure that your local franchisee, and, I've always believed in master franchising or area developers, and not direct franchising. But you want to make sure that they have a business plan. And if their business plan is only capitalized enough to do one location and keep it open for 6 months, don't do it. The likelihood that you will have figured it out in the first 6 months is, how many people hit a grand slam at the first at bat? That's not going to happen. There'll be a slow learn, and obviously each market we go to, we're smarter. So we can take best practices, which is such a big thing for me in franchising. And, kind of taking you back a little bit to ethical franchising is share. I'm in the business of sharing. Let's get our franchisees together to share their experience so that we can trust that everyone loves the brand and are trying to do the right things. Let's share, because they're all dealing with similar problems. And so we can say, gosh, we went to this market and fell flat on its face. But the other thing is you got to go to the market and study the market. Go to cafes, go sit there, go with humility and a notebook, as opposed to saying, we're the greatest people in the world, we're going to kick their butts. That's a terrible attitude to have. Go there and say, wow, they do that well. Wow, I didn't realize that, people in this market care this much about their condiments. All right. Is there an opportunity there? Even I think about international, but I also think about growth domestically. And I think about the experience that Coffee Bean had when we went to Austin, Texas, also the anti-corporate capital of America. We were hyper concerned about making sure that the Coffee Bean that we opened in Austin, honored Austin. And so making sure that we built the location out of Texas stone, hiring local artists to do the bike racks, making sure that the bake case had the greatest hits of the local bakeries, the Round Rock Donut, and making sure that we had the Taco Deli, a breakfast taco. So it wasn't just international. It was just making sure that we were building a bridge in each of the markets we went to make sure that people loved the brand and loved the drinks. And so we've kind of taken that with every brand and execution as we've grown internationally.
Yeah. No, that's smart. Like what you said about Austin's true, because otherwise you're trying to impose your LA DNA into something, and it could go over like a ton of bricks. So that's smart that you said that. Hey, earlier you said something. You said you prefer to do master franchises and DA deals versus multi-unit or direct deals. Just talk about what that means first for someone that doesn't understand the distinction between multi-unit and a master or DA, and then why you like that format.
Sure. Well, direct franchising is typically what most companies in the U.S. do. Same thing with every company I've been with. We sell a franchise to an individual franchisee who has a predetermined marketing area that they can market the brand within in some sort of, distance guideline radius, to make sure that, you don't open locations next door to each other. But the company manages all the relationships directly with franchisees, being if you sell multi-units, you might have an owner that owns 5, 10, 50, 100, or you may have a system that really works on the single unit operator, but that's what direct franchising is. Going internationally, it's very difficult to take that same business model and franchise internationally. We're not in that market. We don't have the systems support or expertise to support an individual franchise owner that's not developing the entire market. They've got their life savings within a single location. I don't recommend to anybody direct franchise in another country. You work in two different models internationally. It would either be a master franchise or an area developer, or combination of the two. An area developer is a sophisticated operator that is well capitalized, that commits to developing a territory, and within that territory, they're going to open up X number of franchise units. But they have the financial wherewithal and the infrastructure to be able to adopt your systems, which were made for your home market. In the U.S., our marketing assets, our SOPs, and all of our brand standards were built for this market. And when we work with a master franchise or an area developer, their job is to convert all of that to work locally, and they own the relationship. In the case of a master franchisee, they sell franchises in the market under a sub-franchise agreement, and we don't have a direct relationship with the sub-franchisee. We have a relationship with a master franchisee. So it's a little bit of a train the trainer, manage the manager program that I think most companies who grow internationally adopt that model.
And you like that why versus an area developer, the guy who's going to own and operate 10 stores versus a guy that's going to master franchise GCC, let's just say. And then he'll find the area developers in each market. Like, why do you like that added layer, even though it theoretically it eats into the revenue, but you can make an argument you're never going to have revenue if you don't have a good local partner.
Yeah, and I think that there's it's really a combination of both. I mean, the way we structure deals is it's a master franchise agreement where the master franchisee has the rights to own and operate all of their own locations if they want to. So it gives them flexibility, and sometimes it all comes down to working with them on their business plan beforehand. Sometimes they want to own and operate, the studios within a specific city, and then for other geographic areas in the country, they want a sub-franchise. They may want a sub-franchise to other big players in that local market, or they may want a sub-franchise to individual owners. And I think it depends on the concept. Think about Mathnasium. The magic to Mathnasium is the center director. And if you have a great center director that knows how to relate to the parents, that studio is going to do well. And if you have some guy that's just going to open up 50 and not place the right center director, that they're going to struggle. And so, I think you've got to be flexible. And by the way, country by country, we vary as well. We have franchisees that want to own and operate all their locations in that market, and that's great. So it's not one or the other.
Yeah, we sell mainly area developers, like people that are going to own and operate a big territory. We have done masters. You said something, I think this is going to be a good nugget. You said, when we help the franchisees with their business plans, there's funny rules in America about what you're allowed to say and not say before they sign up. But after they sign up, and assuming you get a release and whatever, like, tell me, because I think that that's super valuable to be able to help a franchisee build a business plan. So what does that mean to you guys? What are you helping them build?
Well, on the front end of doing a deal, it's not a matter of somebody calls me on the phone and says, "Hi, I'm from India. How much does it cost? How many locations? Great, I'll send you a check. Let's get going." Well, first of all, if you get a check and you don't know how you backed into it or how they're going to, do they have a plan to execute the business where they're going to get their return? If they haven't even thought it out and it doesn't seem reasonable to you, don't do the deal. But there's so much front end work that we do with people to make sure that they put together a well thought out business plan. We learned so much about the parties that we're working with. And again, we view this, as you said, Dan, this is a 20-year relationship. They are the face of our brand in that market. If they fall flat on their face or don't execute well or don't understand our brand or don't have a realistic expectation of what it's going to take, because this is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And the bigger the market it is, the bigger upfront effort it takes. And so we work with them for months. And part of what I say work, because I have a collaborative approach to doing business. They've got to do the business plan. They've got to sell it to us. We need them to ask the questions. I can't give them their revenue expectations. Again, there's legal rights around that. But if we see that they put together a business plan that isn't well thought out or looks like they entered a couple words into ChatGPT and send it to us, they don't know they don't know what they're going to do or how they're executing it or what the reasonable expectations of returns are. And so we want to dig deep. We want them to do a financial projection and figure out what their average revenue per user is and length of stay and lifetime value. And we want them to think through this. It isn't a gotcha. Somebody buys a franchise and is like, "Gotcha, now let's tell you about the business." It's a terrible way to do business. We have great concepts, and in the hands of the right party, it's awesome.
What are some of the things that go in the business plan? Like, and it is a funny thing here in the States, you can't really talk about anything pro forma. I was working with Vapiano. It's a brand based in Germany, and they almost never signed a franchise where they weren't creating with the franchisee their pro forma. I'm like, you can't do that here in the States. But like, what are some of the things that actually go into the business plan or some things that you want to see threading the needle about what you're allowed to do legally?
Well, we want to know that they share a common vision with us. So look, we do our research on a market and we don't know whether our research is right or wrong, but we believe that just for the sake of, market A, we think that it could sustain 100 locations. Okay, so in our minds, that's at least somewhat in the ballpark. So it's not that we know the number is 100. We know the number is not 10. And so if we get somebody who comes and says, "I want to buy the rights to the market, and I want exclusive rights on this market for 20 years, and I'm willing to do 10. Okay, then there's not much to talk about. Doesn't make sense to us. And then we want to know, like, how are you going to execute? Who's the operator? Do you have any operational experience, multi-unit franchise experience? I'm worried about trophy collectors, people who buy the rights to the franchise and what was part of the commitment or the development schedule never comes to fruition. So we want to see how they present and, did they put together a financial pro forma? Did they have a general expectation of what is a realistic expectation for a location? So if they, again, making up numbers, if a location typically does X and they come to with projections of 3 times X, and we've never had a location that's never done that, red flag. If we have, whether it's Mathnasium or Club Pilates or et cetera, we know the range of healthy locations based on the number of members that come. And if we see that they come and their pro forma is completely off the charts, we're just going to say that's unrealistic. And it's important for us to just give them some sort of range of, is this remotely possible? Do you even have the capacity to do this? Or how much do you plan to charge? Well, is there anything else in the market that shows that you can that you will be able to get that amount of money? And so it's kind of a way to get to know each other, to make sure that we're going forward on, because we're going to go together on a journey. It's a long journey, and this goes back to enjoy the journey. Dan, if I'm going to work with you for 20 years, I have to make sure I'm going to enjoy having dinner with you in 5 years. If I'm going to dread it, why do I want to go down this journey with you?
Yeah, totally. And then just a little bit more international, then we'll get back to the meat. Any other good lessons that you've learned along the way? Some hard lessons that you've learned along the way? I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking about this. We had a burger brand. It was based in Toronto. We sold the rights to Saudi to a group, a large group. And I think the upfront fee was $500,000, something like that. And so they came out to Toronto, paid the money. We took it to the embassy, the Saudi embassy, to go get everything finalized and get the stamp and all that other stuff. So we thought the deal was done. 6 months later, we get a invoice from Saudi for a franchise fee sales tax of 25%, $125,000. It's like it never occurred to any of us to even ask if there was such a tax. And so now it's obviously on our checklist. But some of the best lessons you learn the hard way. But what are any other lessons that you've learned that someone can learn from?
Well, you may have the same problem in 10 different countries, but it's not the same solution in all 10 countries. You got to calibrate what your strategy is going to be. And ultimately, before you try to resolve or achieve something, you got to be clear in your mind of what is it that you're trying to resolve or achieve. And don't let ego or emotions get in the way of what you need to do. And again, I've done plenty of things in my career that I've learned didn't work, and I've had to retreat and say, right, I need to take a different tactic on that. So I think maybe this is too general, but doing business internationally, you really have to be open-minded and not be so fixated that there's only one road to achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. You may need, how many times have I wanted to fire or terminate someone only to realize I don't have the rights, I don't have the ability, I've got to figure out another way to deal with this. Whether it's, talk to them diplomatically about how they can divest of the brand, or maybe we can team up together to sell the brand or do something. But I don't know if I'm directly answering your questions. Every situation I've had internationally has been a new experience for me that I've had to draw upon all of my previous experience to make sure and to check myself as I proceed forward on trying to achieve or resolve something, whether I'm making progress. And I do it all the time. I stop and I reconsider, and oftentimes I change course because I'm realizing I'm not achieving what I need to achieve.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to ethical franchising, because that's important to me. But what does that actually look like in practice to you? Beyond just the marketing slogan, what does ethical what should it mean?
Well, I think you've got to be honest about what your brand is. Make sure that you know what the business model is, and that the business model can work if executed correctly. Whatever you have in the agreement, you got to put that aside. You've got to be able to be there and give as much support as possible. So I don't know, I can give lots of examples. Some of the things that I've encountered as I've come into companies is I'll go into a company and you'll get a franchisee who doesn't have a lot of marketing assets. And I'll say, well, what are we sharing with them? And the team will say, well, this was for this market, and it really doesn't relate to them. Okay, but why are we not sharing it with them? Even if it's not relevant for their market, they could get some experience from that. They could learn something from it. So again, I think part of it is just always showing up, being there whenever they need to be, and you're in it together. And so it's almost it's not a hierarchical relationship, even though it technically is. You have to have common respect for one another, and you have to, whatever their concerns are, their real concerns, you have to hear them out. You may not agree with it, though oftentimes they may come to you with a solution that they think is the right solution, which obviously can't work for you. But to say nothing or do nothing or bury your head in the sand, that's unacceptable. So I think that's part of the ethics of being a franchise, is knowing that they've signed to be part of your system. You can't ever forget that.
Well, and to that end, walk us through some of the non-negotiable responsibilities that a franchisor has to the franchisees. Like, you've taken their money, now what?
I mean, obviously we have to provide them support, not only, giving them the standards and coaching them through their operations. And it's to be there enough to help them get their business off the ground without getting in the way of their business. Because I can also see a lot of franchise owners that are overbearing and get in the way of their franchisee. There's got to be a certain level of trust and common respect between the franchisor and the franchisee. Also, having open and honest conversations about innovations or ideas that you have, or sharing. Gosh, we tried this test in the U.S. and it didn't work. Bring them into the inner circle. And so a responsible franchisor is sharing everything that you have, and also giving them access to best practices and proactively sharing best practices. And not only once you get a location open, it's going back and visiting and coaching again. In the case of master franchising, you're coaching the coach. You're sharing with them best practices of how we coach our franchisees. You want them to coach their franchisees. We don't have the right to go to their individual franchisees without their consent. And it's not that we would ever go on our own. We might go on a visit together, but almost think of it as a sub-franchisee is a unionized environment. You can talk to the union rep, but you can't talk to the employees of the union.
Yeah. How about some best practices around communication with franchisees? Like, it's not enough just to send out newsletters and have chat boards and stuff like that. Like, what are some best practices beyond all that stuff, but also like personally making sure as a franchisor grows, you still have to actually physically talk and look at your franchisees and hear them individually. What do you think about that?
The more communication you can do, the better. And it's on many different levels. It's not like I have a team of people and they all communicate with the franchisees, and we're very good at communicating within ourselves. But, the new open people, talk to them. We all have our conversations with them. But we also have regular communications of newsletters. They want to celebrate the wins. And so it's, whenever we have a new opening, we want to share with them. We tag them on our social media posts. We share with one another. We try several times a year to get together. I was just in Spain a week ago, where we got all the Club Pilates franchisees in Europe together, and they crave being together, and they crave, sharing, their milestones and what's your performance in your location, et cetera. Again, they're free to share the information they want with each other. And we encourage people to get together because they all love the brands and they're trying to do the best they possibly can. And so I think a lot of franchisors try to keep franchisees separate, and, they're afraid they may gang up on them. I'm not afraid of that. But we also show up. I go to, not only me, I'm always in locations. I'm probably on the road 2 weeks a month, because there's no substitute for showing up and knowing what's important to the franchisees. They have a big holiday or whatever it is, even on a personal level, knowing that their kid just got married and acknowledging them that it's not just a business relationship. They're fully invested in this, and they need to see that the franchisor is fully invested in them.
Yeah. Tell me about your thoughts on, like, mechanically, transparency, sharing financials, territory protection for franchisees, and then the support infrastructure. Like, first of all, transparency and financials. So what do you believe a franchisor should share? Our best practice is like when we were growing Five Guys, we secret shopped every single store twice a week, every week of the year. And we would disclose the secret shopper reports as well as the weekly sales reports, as well as trends with every franchise, including the franchisor stores. So when the franchisor in the beginning, Five Guys like, yeah, let's do it. Just not the corporate stores. And we're like, no, all of them. But, so we disclose that. And it seems painful in the beginning to disclose, because then you're also showing, hey, you've got some weaker performers, right? You've got some franchisees that are getting low secret shopper scores or whatever it is. We found that the best way to influence those numbers were to make them transparent. But I'm just curious, frankly, I would like to disclose every single franchisee's P&L against the franchisor's P&L, especially if a franchisor has a good item 19. You list you take minute detail, and given this beautiful item 19, well, then lay out all the franchisees in exactly the same format. Let's see how everyone's doing and focus on that. And franchisors are scared to death to do that kind of stuff. So are some franchisees. But what do you think?
Well, I totally agree with you, by the way. They want a benchmark. Every company has their KPIs that are the real indicators of the business, and they want to know how they're tracking, also how they're ramping, right? So it's not that it's a static number. One of the things that I have to explain to people is, in a lot of markets, we're accelerating a lot faster to hit those KPI milestones that we hit in the US that everyone strives to hit. We're like, well, it took us 7 years to hit it in America. You've hit it in 18 months. So, and part of that is them understanding it. So benchmarking, sharing. One of the companies I was previously with, I thought was really smart about locking down chart of accounts. And that really helped everybody look at all and analyze all of the locations on an even playing field, that you couldn't hide the owner's car as a marketing expense and other things like that. We were very clear of what was an expense and what wasn't, because we wanted to look at the real numbers and analyze it. But that's also part of our field team, and our field team's responsibility is to have a minimum of contact once a week by phone, have a business review every month, and visit every location at least once a year, and visit every owner twice a year. So it's, because you may have multi-unit owners and they may not be around, but every location deserves to have a personal visit from the franchisor once a year. And so all of those things I think are really important. Transparency is important. If you have a healthy system and you're all working towards a greater goal, you'd be open about those things.
Yeah. Talk to me about some win-wins, some best practices for win-wins around royalty structures, the creative fund, the marketing fund, how everyone pays into a international fund, which is the bane of so much frustration. And then also rebates. What is sort of the right win-win solution for those things in your opinion? Royalties, rebates, marketing fund.
Well, it's easier to address in international because, there is a split that we have with our master franchisees on all of that. So we're in it together. And so it's not that we get and they don't get. We've teamed up together. So win-wins, and actually I've experienced this in most of the companies I've been with, is you have to have at least 2 suppliers for every item that you need in your location, so you're not beholden to one single supplier. And we may believe that the espresso machine that Coffee Bean uses is the best in the world, but the local distributor is gouging us or just terribly disorganized. We can't hold them to a standard that's not financially feasible. We deal with that in fitness as well. So we have to be realistic about finding local supply chain solutions so that they're not just getting killed in import taxes, and which ultimately raises the price to open a location, which oftentimes puts them even further behind the 8 ball in being profitable, because that may be a market that may not achieve US level of sales, and yet their cost to build out could be higher. So it's really staying focused to make sure that we work together with them to find a solution, because if the consumer has the same experience and they're none the wiser that we use this supplier instead of that supplier, why do we care?
Many times sacred cows should be slaughtered. What are some of the sacred cows that you see franchisors holding on to that are holding the brand back?
I have a lot to say about sacred cows, because I think it is so destructive to businesses. And I guess the way I define sacred cows are rituals or specifics about the brand that the franchisor has deemed on their own to be non-negotiables. So anytime nothing can be talked about, that becomes a sacred cow. And it could be Coffee Bean had the original oak counters, which was part of the original concept, and it had to be made by a single manufacturer. And it was like, if we're going to stick to this, we shouldn't open internationally. Like, no one cares about it. And when you start talking to franchisees and they're not opening because of the cost of the counter, something's wrong. So I think it's okay to have all these rituals and everything. It's nothing should be a non-negotiable. And I know someone's going to listen to this podcast and make me eat my words for it. But look, I think that even if these are non-negotiables, you should be able to explain this to a franchisee in the system, why it's an essential element of the brand, but there should be no topic that they couldn't bring up.
Yeah. All right. 3 more questions and we'll wrap this up. Why do so many franchisors sell franchises to people that don't look like they're qualified? They might have money, but they don't have experience, or they have experience, but they don't have money. How do you say no to a check from the wrong person, especially a big check?
It takes a lot of courage, and especially at the stage of development that a company is in, there's a lot of smaller companies that check is essential for their survival. And, there's always a justification that a smaller company will have of, how do I know that this guy won't be the next, Bill Gates? How do I know that this guy, I don't know. But I also feel like you have to have a responsibility and know when your company is ready to franchise. And it's not fair to the franchisees that are coming into a system. If you're not ready to franchise, I know it's easy for me to say because I'm not in their situation at the time, but it's very, very risky. So I find that smaller companies that are trying to get themselves are taking some real Hail Mary risks to sign people up. And by the way, it works out a lot of the time. It's not that it's a foolproof effort, but I guess I'm a little more cautious of, it would weigh very heavily on me if I knowingly signed somebody up to a system that I just knew that they weren't qualified to do. And so part of that comes down to, how you vet franchisees out. And one of the things that I would always do in discovery days is I'd spend a good portion of the day trying to talk them out of buying the franchise. It's not that I didn't want them to buy the franchise, but I want them to get an idea of what it is to be a franchise, to be a franchisee. And I would use the example at Mathnasium of, you're building your business, you still haven't hit your break even, you have a family that comes in and they need help with, biology. If you think that you're going to say yes, then go and create your own learning center and make all the decisions on your own. Here's why we would say no. And it may not be the right decision for you, but it's the right decision for the brand. And this is why. And I try to get ahead of those issues because I don't want them to get in 3 months later and then them losing their mind because they need that check and they don't understand why we are standing in the way of revenue for their location.
What's your criteria for picking the right franchisee? Do you have are you pretty firm with that, or is a lot of it just shoot from the hip?
No, I mean, I'm firm with it, but I'm firm that I have a decision tree to go by. And, there's the obvious vetting of, do they understand the business? Are they engaged in the business? Do they have the right background?
You said earlier, would they be the customer, right? That's a telltale one.
For sure. I mean, I used to say in all my companies, the goal of the company, and I said this at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, we're the franchisor of choice. What does that mean? That means your next franchisee is currently in your locations right now buying a drink. And you need to treat every franchisee, every customer like they're the next investor in the business. And you get this when you meet people of when they don't know about the brand or they're passionate about the brand, that passion is really key because that's a common ground that you have with them. And if it's, Five Guys or another burger or whatever else, no, you have to be bought into why this is the best burger. So I kind of think of this, and I've always talked about this a little bit as my hiring criteria, but I also use this, to vet franchisees. I usually think of when I meet somebody, I try to figure out, are they an owner or a renter? They have an owner mentality or a renter mentality. Would I buy a used car from this person? Next thing is, is this somebody I would work for? Would I buy a franchise from these people? If I wouldn't, why would I want to sell them a franchise? Dan, I mentioned this to you earlier, the 5-year dinner test. I do this mentally in my mind. I meet somebody and I think, oh, they'll be a fun person to have dinner with in 5 years. Oh my God, I can't imagine going to dinner with this guy in 5 years. That's on the back of my mind. And then, something kind of funny, but I always think of people as, are they an FFA or not? And an FFA is a fully functional adult. Do I have to explain them basic adulting or not? And I just need to make sure that we choose the right people because we're going to go on a long journey together.
Yeah. How about advice? The last thing, advice to a franchisor. I mean, every day people are applying for us to help them franchise, and they don't have the right numbers. They don't have infrastructure. They really shouldn't be franchising. What is your requirement, or what's your advice to someone before they even start franchising? What should they already have in place?
They have to have a compelling concept that consumers love. And it's not that they love it and they have 5 consumers. Is there a buzz? Is there something that they can stand out in a crowd? Because no matter what segment they're in, I guarantee you there's 100 competitors for them. So look, Dan, you were in burgers. How hard is it to stand out in burgers? We were at coffee bean and tea leaf. So how could we stand out in a crowd? And the coffee bean thing was, we loved being the underdog and the Avis rental cars of coffee. Like, we try harder. That was something we always said internally. But okay, assuming that you have a compelling concept that consumers are passionate about, do you have proven unit level economics and a replicable model? How many franchises I see at these franchise expos? You haven't been around for a single year. You haven't even comped 1 year over another year. What are you doing selling a franchise? Do you have documented systems and training that don't rely on the founder's gut feeling of that day? Do you have a strong culture that can be taught? Do you have financial transparency that you can, again, show? Because when you're franchising, your original location is kind of the model home. You got to let them come in and see the location and see if it's something that they want. And are you prepared to support them and not, when they struggle, not abandon them?
I have the very last thing. I know I said the last thing, but the very last thing. I have friends that are Club Pilates franchisees, and they love that concept. They rave and they keep opening more. Like, what do you think Club Pilates does right that people can learn from?
I think that we stay focused on what we're good at, and we don't try to chase our competitors. We have our segment within Pilates, and despite the fact that there's so many challengers out there, it's great that there are challengers out there. They're publicizing Pilates, but we have really leaned into, the services that we offer. And it's not just Pilates, it's a pretty complete program with, TRX and, chair reformers and springboards. And it's a pretty robust product. But the other thing is that we lean into the club part of Club Pilates. It's a real community, and give the franchisees encouragement to create their local communities that drive such loyalty, and the unit level economics are compelling. So, I mean, it's a great brand that, consumers reward us with their length of stay. And by the way, we're seeing that everywhere in the world, that it's not. So of the things that we have to adjust, it's never the program itself. It's, maybe the changing rooms, or, the approach to social media, or maybe the lobby looks a little different, but the actual product itself and the standards of what we teach is exactly the same everywhere in the world.
That's awesome. Bob, you've been amazing. Thank you very much. I know I've taken up a little bit over an hour, so I really appreciate it. Where can people learn more about you and your companies?
LinkedIn is a great way to reach out. I'm on Bob Kaufman on LinkedIn, and our company is Xponential Fitness. We have 5 brands: Club Pilates, Yoga 6, Stretch Lab, Pure Barre, and Body Fit Training.
Awesome. We'll include the links and the hyperlinks, but thank you very much. I really appreciate this. And audience, you know the drill. If you like this, and share this, and we will see you next episode. Thanks again, Bob.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm your host, Dan Rowe. If you enjoyed today's episode, this podcast is only going to get better. Please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more from the most successful franchisors and franchisees, and we'll see you next time.